Bon, ben, bonjour tout le monde. Apparemment, vous êtes déjà une cinquantaine à nous avoir rejoints, donc ça arrive. Merci pour l'intérêt, merci d'être là nombreux. C'est important pour nous, c'est important pour MAURTEN. Je suis en train de vous accueillir en français. Je vous remercie d'être tous là. Je passe directement à l'anglais. To give my welcome to Ben Vrins, country manager and an athlete in MAURTEN. Ariane is online also, is the head of sports marketing at MAURTEN, and Tobias, the head of nutrition in MAURTEN. Welcome, guys. Thank you to be with us today. Je vais repasser au français et vous allez vite comprendre que ce meeting, que ce webinaire, il va alterner entre le français et l'anglais. Bien sûr, nos invités étant anglophones, ils vont nous exposer tous les concepts en anglais, mais on aura des prises de questions en français, on les traduira. Chacun qui est là aussi, vous le savez tous, est américain, donc il va jongler avec les deux langues beaucoup mieux que moi, et on va avancer comme ça. On a appelé ce meeting « Briefing Nutrition MAURTEN ». Ça veut dire qu'aujourd'hui, Nutri-Bay et MAURTEN se sont accordés pour venir vous exposer, avec l'ambition qu'on a, que vous nous connaissez, les fondamentaux scientifiques, les bases scientifiques sur lesquelles repose l'élaboration d'une gamme de produits chez MAURTEN et qui, quoi, comment les prendre. Donc, comment ça se décline aussi en protocole et à qui sont destinés ces protocoles. Vous savez très bien que MAURTEN a cette image aussi d'être vraiment très, très apprécié par des athlètes pro, mais la preuve en est, puisqu'on est là, vous êtes beaucoup, on a une très, très grosse base client qui aussi utilise les produits MAURTEN. Donc, du loisir au pro, MAURTEN est là et a décliné la science de la nutrition dans une gamme de produits qu'ils vont passer un peu de temps à vous expliquer. Donc, écoutez bien, interagissez, droppez toutes les questions sur le chat parce que c'est important. Kyrian, qui est là derrière, vous ne le voyez pas, est en train de déjà vous lire et on traduira. D'accord? Donc, c'est vraiment le moment pour acquérir de nouvelles connaissances sur la nutrition, bien sûr, la manière dont MAURTEN l'a appliqué à ses produits, sur la gamme de produits MAURTEN et sur les protocoles. Peut-être 2-3 anecdotes. Et si vous restez jusqu'au bout, on vous fera un petit code cadeau, comme d'hab. Ceci dit, on fait un webinaire. Soyez un peu indulgents, c'est un de nos premiers. On est là pour une quarantaine de minutes avec, comme je vous l'ai dit, des questions qui seront traduites. Un format où chaque va interagir avec Tobias pendant un certain temps pour poser un certain nombre de questions. Les autres, on les prendra à la fin. En faisant questions-réponses. Peut-être quelques anecdotes, puisqu'ils ont vu défiler des grands athlètes, sur Berlin notamment, qui ont testé leurs produits. Donc, j'espère qu'on aura 2-3 trucs un peu croustillants. Et donc, on va avoir une alternance entre, je vous les représente, d'abord Ben Vrins, country manager, qui va nous exposer un peu l'histoire de cette marque, comment elle s'est installée, comment ça s'est décliné en produit, et qui sera suivi de Tobias dans un petit jeu avec toi. Vous allez bien vous poser des questions, vous allez vous pousser, on va peut-être connaître des secrets. Et enfin, Ben reviendra pour parler un peu plus de protocole, aussi avec Ariane, etc., pour redonner 2-3 fondamentaux sur les protocoles. Bon, ceci dit, mon boulot s'arrête là pour vous accueillir. Je vous dis encore une fois, merci. Le team Nutri-Bay, vous le savez, a passé beaucoup de temps, depuis maintenant 4 ans, à vous expliquer tout ce qu'on sait nous-mêmes de MAURTEN. Et ben voilà, ce nouveau format, j'espère qu'il va vous plaire. En tout cas, pour nous, c'est une aventure qui commence. Et voilà, c'est tout. Est-ce que Ben est prêt pour qu'on lui passe la parole? OK, Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Merci. So, bonsoir to everyone. My French is not yet at the level of you guys, so we will do this in English. I think GC was mentioning the program. I could hear that quickly, and I think he told the first part will be a little bit of the history of MAURTEN, and I will be telling a little in a short version how this brand is established in the in the sports. And maybe if I forget something, we have Tobias who can fill me up on this later. But we will start where it started in the world. And actually, the first time MAURTEN was used, it was in the Berlin Marathon, and Berlin Marathon is coming soon. So that's maybe why you attend this meeting, because you are running the Berlin Marathon. And we started for the first time with athlete well known Kenanisha Bekele. He was running in 2016 for the first time with MAURTEN in a race, and I believe he was the first athlete who showed actually this bottle to the big audience on the television worldwide. And people were asking him like, what is this bottle, what is this brand MAURTEN doing on the bottle? And actually nobody in the world of running knew something about MAURTEN. So actually, yeah, this brand was so new, and they didn't know why he was taking this. So he was planning on this marathon to go for the first time below 2 hours and 5 minutes. But turns out after the finish, he won in 2 hours, 3 minutes and 3 seconds. And I don't think that's a very bad time. So it was one of the best times at that moment. And we don't know if this is true, what I'm going to tell you now, but he told a lot of people from the press and other athletes, I think this is coming from this sports drink, and it's called MAURTEN. And I tell you again, this is very anecdotal. We don't know if this was true. He won by the drink, but he was thinking like it made him running really fast. And from there, everything accelerated really fast. So in the top sports, a lot of people started using this brand and started asking the head office of MAURTEN to use MAURTEN. And I think Tobias was a big part in this. So maybe he can tell something more about this situation later. But it became very popular among the big athletes in a short time. And actually, we can say most of the marathons were run or were won on these years by athletes who were using MAURTEN. So a lot of people around the world started to ask, can we buy this product, or is this available for everyone? And then this product was released, and we started with these two products. It was the Drink Mix 320 and the Drink Mix 160. So maybe some of you know these products already or use them a lot, but what was special about it was that you could use 80 grams of carbohydrates per hour instead of 30 to 35 grams per hour for on an average athlete in a race. And that was a big game changer for the sports. So a lot of people started who were really into their sport, they started using this MAURTEN drink mixes. And I'm going through this story really fast, but a year later, this product arrived. It was the Gel 100, because this was used by a lot of runners. It was actually released in Berlin. It was used by a lot of runners who couldn't take their bottles with them, or it was a very practical product. And we like to say about this product that it actually was the first time a gel was launched in sports nutrition, because all the gels we already know are syrups in a way. So, and this was really a gel, and it was way much more easy on the stomach and helping your performance. But later more in depth on this. the caffeine gel came in after that, and even a CAF 320 after this. So it was very popular to use this in races and to use the caffeine as a stimulus for the brain and the body to perform even better. And in the last year, we added some products without a hydrogel technology. So that's these. It's just released. And these are our solids, as we call them. And these solids, we took it into another perspective. It was not about hydrogel fuel, but it was about creating an energy bar where you had a lot of energy in the bar, and you had the least problems with this consuming it in the endurance sports. So that's where the products are now. And as today we are a well established brand and becoming a household name in the world of sports nutrition. But we can still ask ourselves, why is it like this? Why is this sports nutrition growing so fast in this big market? And why do a lot of people use this product? And when they use it, they won't shift to another product anymore. But I think to answer this, we have to go back to Jean-Charles and Jacques, who can ask some questions about what actually MAURTEN is, and what is the ingredients, and what is the hydrogel in MAURTEN actually meaning. And Tobias will answer these questions.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. That was very, very interesting. And I think that the next part we're going to go to Tobias, and with a little introduction from Tobias. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Tobias.
Yeah, hi everyone who are listening, and good job, Ben, and you who are hosting this. I'm really happy to be here. I just came back from an easy run. Maybe you hear my voice. I have a small cold. I am the one who is preparing for Berlin, so the cold I have now is very bad timing. So my title at MAURTEN is the head of nutrition, and I've been there since early 2017. So just before we launched the drink mixes, Ben just showed, I started at MAURTEN, and I started at MAURTEN perhaps 1 year after I finished my master degree in sports science, and I also have a master degree in clinical nutrition, and thereafter also a master actually in sports nutrition. So I'm a pretty wide scientific and academic background. And yeah, as Ben said, I mean, it has been a crazy journey at MAURTEN. We have grown so fast. Sure, Kenenisa Bekeles usage of MAURTEN in Berlin was big, but I would say that a turning point was really the Nike Breaking 2 attempt with Eliud Kipchoge in May 2017. And after that race, which was super successful, Kipchoge was only 25 seconds from this magic barrier. It became kind of official that he also used this Swedish drink. And from there, I think it's kind of fair that from there we kind of grown really fast, and that race kind of facilitated the signed partnership with different athletes and so on. I have two main roles at MAURTEN, one in the research and development team, and one in the what we call the athlete management team or sports marketing team. So I try to bridge the gap between the athletes in the field and the science and the research and so on. So I have kind of two legs. And yeah, so that was a little bit about me. How should we move on here? Do you want the Ask the questions.
I prepared a few questions, and they're very general questions, and after that, we can open the floor for the participants' questions.
Yeah,
that's
super. Yeah,
Great.
I think it's perfect. Yeah.
So the first question is very general, but it totally falls in your background. Sports performance, sports nutrition. You are the scientist. You know.
Where do we start?
Together. What does science tell us? How to deal with sports nutrition and sports performance? What's the relationship?
I mean, I would like to take a step back and zoom out a little bit and go back to a very important fundamental principle with training development, and that's the principle of a kind of a progressive overload. I mean, the fundamental is really that we need to stress the body so a kind of stimuli or it kind of promotes adaptation, and that happens if we recover properly and enough. And for this to happen, I mean, to stress the body, we need the fuel, of course, and carbohydrates is the main fuel to do this. So after we have stressed the body, we need the recovery to prepare for the next key session and the next hard session, because that's where we kind of become better. So carbohydrates is the main fuel for high intensity work. It can be used what we call in aerobic metabolism or aerobic energy turnover, but also in anaerobic energy turnover. So that's a fuel that works both below threshold and above threshold. And we also know, of course, with when it comes to carbohydrates, that the fuel stores are limited. So when we train really hard and intense, we become depleted on carbohydrates, and we need to replenish them after a hard session. So that's kind of my starting point. The second thing I want to kind of, when I have an athlete in front of me, I always, of course, ask and try to make sure that I understand the sport. I understand the demands of the sport and demands on all of the training program, because that's the kind of the fundamental building block before kind of we implement a nutrition strategy. So the training program is the fundamental in a way. And I mean, when it comes to carbohydrates, it rests on really, really solid science that it's the main fuel and also the main kind of substrate for performance. And this has been shown over and over again, really. So it's really hard to argue against it. However, there are always the nuances to when we need it and when we perhaps need less of it, of course.
You're actually almost jumping into my next question. So I'm going to focus on a second, but just to summarize what your answer was in general. So an important aspect to performance is progressive overload as we slowly increase.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we need a good recovery and we need a good fuel. And basically the best fuel science has shown us is carbs.
Yeah.
Between the three major. And it works both aerobically and anaerobically and helps you recover as well.
Yeah.
So if you have the right carb, it will help your performance recovery, and then you can progressively improve your performance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Great, thank you. So we kind of started to tap into my second question, which was going to, now that you mentioned carbs and performance, so, you know, again, what does the science, what does your experience tell you that we need to take carbs per hour? You know, what kind of intake do we need per hour of performance?
Yeah, so there are two main kind of factors to consider when we start a nutrition plan. And the first is duration, but also intensity. I mean, if I'm prepared on a Saturday and I'm prepared for a long run on Sunday morning, for example, the intensity and the duration will dictate how much carbohydrates I will need. I mean, and we have two kind of thresholds, intensity thresholds. So we have a lactate threshold, which is a quite low, steady, easy kind of threshold, exercise intensity. And then we also have an anaerobic threshold, which is a more intense exercise intensity, where we also burn much more carbs. So depending on the intensity and depending on the duration, we need different amounts of carbs. I mean, I could do a 2-hour, very, very easy run, for example, without carbohydrates, because the intensity is that low and I'm burning a lot of fat at the same time. And burning some carbohydrates and use it for movement, but in all, I mean, it's a mixture of fat and carbohydrates for fuel. But if I'm more ambitious and I want to break my PB, for example, or I want to stress the body and I want this progressive overload, I need to fuel, because I'm closer to the anaerobic threshold, which means I will be much more carbohydrate driven, and that will kind of challenge my carbohydrate stores after 1.5 hours up to 2 hours, for example. So during those scenarios, there are different kind of recommendations how to fuel to kind of best perform. And MAURTEN have been involved in many of these studies. So, and in science, they call them tracer studies. So you actually can follow the path of the carbohydrates from the MAURTEN drink through the body, and by the breath, you can actually collect and analyze how much of the MAURTEN drink you are actually oxidizing or burning. So by those study, and by studying the kind of absorption and studying the oxidation rate of an external source of carbohydrates, that's kind of the background behind the carbohydrate intake guidelines that exist. So normally it takes a while, maybe it takes up to 1 hour before you have a substantial use of the carbohydrates you ingest. So it takes pretty long. And that means below 60 minutes, it's really not that important to take a lot of carbs, because you rely on the fuel stores you have loaded the day before or in the meal before, for example. Perhaps between 1 and 2 hours, carbohydrates from an external source becomes more important. And the fuel recommendation is perhaps between 30 up to 60 grams per hour. So if I do a pretty hard Sunday run, for example, a 20K pretty tough run with sections of threshold intensity and so on, 30 to 60 grams per hour would be my go-to. And that kind of intake target can be covered by different products, of course, or different MAURTEN products. I don't know if we want to share that now, but for example, a half of a bottle of the 320 mix would be 40 grams of carbs. Yes, so that's 80 grams of carbs. So for a full 90-minute run, for example, 1 bottle of the 320 mix would be one suggestion, for example, or one option. Or you can use perhaps 3 gels, or there are many different options or combinations that can be used during a 2-hour run, for example. But again, what's dictating the kind of the fueling plan is really the intensity and the duration.
Okay, so to summarize more or less.
Maybe not summarize, actually, because so there is also an upper kind of ceiling or an upper kind of limit on how much carbohydrates you actually should intake during an exercise. So, I mean, let's take the very world-class triathletes, for example, like Christian Blumenfeld, who is breaking the Ironman world record, for example. He's so well trained that he perhaps is burning close to 1,500 calories per hour when he's running and cycling really hard and fast. And that means that he can never kind of replace carbohydrates fast enough. So, and that's because of the intestinal absorption of carbohydrates. So it seems like the human body have a limitation on how much we actually can absorb.
But you can also train yourself to, absorb more? In other words, we have our limits, but we can pass them with training?
Yes. However, it's a lot of these kind of concepts, the gut training concept, that is a little bit unknown at the moment. So that's something for future investigation, if we really can train the gut even more. So today, this kind of the scientific, most established carbohydrate intake recommendations suggest up to 90 grams of carbohydrates for prolonged endurance events, more than 2 to 2.5 hours.
Per hour? 90 grams per hour?
Yeah,
Right.
and that's quite a lot, of course.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
quite a lot. But that's, again, so that's more for the ambitious and more competitive runner or cyclist or triathlete who really want to break their PB, who are closer to the anaerobic threshold, who are burning a lot of carbohydrates.
Right. And of course, that 90 grams can be achieved using a variety of different MAURTEN products. It doesn't have to be one single product. It can be, like you said, 3 gels. It can be your 320 drink mix.
Yeah.
etc. And then
Exactly.
on top of that, of course, we have caffeine, which, I guess would be kind of a boost on top of the carbs.
Exactly. So caffeine is also extremely well established that it can enhance performance in a variety of different sports, both prolonged endurance events and also very short, high intensity events. So all different sports, it seems like caffeine can work. The kind of recommendation there is 3 to 6 milligrams per kg. So me, for example, is 80 kilos times 3, for example, that would be 240 milligrams of caffeine.
Per hour.
No, not per hour, not per hour. So just to have your peak concentration, and that's it, more or less.
Okay.
So for me, that would be, or that would correspond to 2 to 4 of the MAURTEN caffeine products for me.
Right.
But for a lighter, let's say a 60 kilo female runner, for example, 200 milligrams would correspond to, close to 3 milligram per kg.
I think I might need 5 or 6 at least.
but what's important there as well, so it seems like, yes, caffeine works. However, we do have people and athletes who are not habitual used to caffeine. Right. And the MAURTEN gels and the MAURTEN drink mix 320 with caffeine 100 contains a pretty potent dose of caffeine. So for athletes who are not used to caffeine, it can be quite a lot, actually.
Well, one thing we always say here at Nutri-Bay is that before using any product at any event, including MAURTEN, you should always test it out in advance during your practice to be sure that your body can support either the levels of carbs or caffeine, and even the product itself, the absorption itself. So
super important, and it's the same with with the carbohydrate intake recommendation. You should always practice it in training, and you should have a gradual increase, like training, of course. Right. I mean, today, scientists, they see the gut and the intestine like a muscle. So with use and with exposure, it gets better. Oh.
Sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm smiling because I think the stomach has been understudied for a long time, and it's only now, I feel like it's the last few years we're seeing so much new research into how important of a role the stomach has on your health, on your performance as an athlete, if you want. It all has to do with with the type of food you put in there, the type of bacteria, the natural flora you have. So all these new, very exciting research is coming out, and I'm sure that also will affect how we see sports nutrition change as well.
Yeah.
With information that comes out.
And I mean, we have not stressed that or addressed that yet, but I mean, the reason why MAURTEN is special is because of this hydrogel concept.
Right.
And we have gained so much success in the last years because of this concept, and because athletes perceived they can tolerate a higher amount of carbohydrate at high exercise intensities compared to other products.
I'm going to skip the question, which I was going to do a little bit later, but really, we're talking about the hydrogel. And of course, I was going to ask you about the different ingredients in MAURTEN, and one of them, or two of them, is the alginate and the pectin.
Yeah.
And of course, that's your specialty. That's what makes MAURTEN so special, and it makes this whole concept of hydrogel be so effective. So, can you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I tried to explain it in a very simple way. So in the MAURTEN products, we have added gelling components or gelling ingredients. So alginate and pectin that we use in the drink mixes are two kinds of gelling components. We extract alginate from seaweed and we extract pectin from citrus fruits. So those two
are both very natural products. I mean,
natural products, yes. And those two together can form a gel in different environments, like an acidic environment. So I used to explain the MAURTEN drink as a pH sensitive drink. It's also pH neutral. So it's close to pH 7, but when it hits the acidic environment in the stomach, it reacts with the acid and creates this jelly-like structure, this gel. So that's how it works in the drink. In the gel, we have created the gel outside the body by kind of creating those crosslinks between calcium ions and alginate. And hydrogels, I mean, it's not MAURTEN's kind of concept. It has been around in the kind of the food industry and the pharma industry for 40 years, for many, many decades. And it's used in medicine and drug development and so on. So it's not a new thing. But MAURTEN have now transferred this kind of ideas to the sports nutrition industry. And actually, only a few days ago, the patents was actually approved in the US. And that's huge, I can say. I mean, that's very, very big. And that's a process that have taken 6 years to approve a patent in the US and Europe, for example. So that's huge. So that's a little bit about alginate and pectin. And those are dietary fibers. The amount we add is super tiny. And that's pretty amazing. And they kind of stress how potent those ingredients really are. So the gel, if you have that in front of you, I mean, it's only a tiny amount that create that jelly-like structure. I mean, most of the ingredients are water, glucose, and fructose. So that
which brings me to my next question, which is you're setting me up every time. It's great. Brings me to my next question: the carbs. Your choice of carbs. You said and the ratio that you have it. Why specifically those two, and why specifically that ratio? Yeah,
there is a risk now that we are becoming too kind of technical, but I hope that's fine. So, I mean, the smallest carbohydrate units that can be absorbed in the intestine are glucose and fructose. And there are glucose chains. And if we have a glucose chain, we have the ingredients maltodextrin, for example. And if we have a huge kind of network or chain of glucose molecules, we build up starch. So a starch molecule that we eat from bread and we eat from potatoes and rice and so on must be digested to the smallest part, the smallest glucose molecules, before we can absorb them.
I equate it sometimes to a big wall of Legos, and we start to breaking them into their individual little pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that there is a theoretical, at least, it's a theoretical belief that the human body can absorb 60 grams or 1 gram per minute of glucose molecules, or 60 grams per hour from glucose, maltodextrin, or starch. If we are adding fructose to a product, or adding fructose to those 60 grams per hour, we can increase the absorption of the carbohydrates up to 90 and even more. So we have been involved in studies where the participant can oxidize 110 grams per hour. Oxidize, not only consuming, but actually oxidize within the muscle cells. The ratio between here is important. So we use different ratios in the products. Kind of the traditional and conventional ratio is a 2-to-1 ratio or 0.5-to-1 ratio between fructose and maltodextrin or glucose. So that ratio we use in the drink mix 160, and the idea there, or the background, was to create a product with very low sweetness. So maltodextrin is less sweet than the same amount from glucose. So that was the idea. Whereas in the drink mix 320, we have added a little bit more fructose to the mixture compared to the 2-to-1 or 0.5-to-1 ratio. So we are closer to 0.7-to-1 ratio between fructose and maltodextrin. In the gels, instead of maltodextrin, we are using glucose. And that's because we don't have preservatives in the products. So they are pH neutral. So we don't use citric acid and so on for preservative reasons. And in the gel, that is known in the food science and food industry that the sugar concentration is super important as a preservative. So in the gel, it's a 60% sugar mixture. And because we use fructose and glucose in that product, we can increase the kind of the water activity, or we decrease the water activity. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it matters, but I don't remember. But for that reason, because that you are using glucose and fructose, we can have a product with a quite long shelf life without using preservatives.
Okay.
But in the gel, we are using 0.8-to-1 ratio between fructose and glucose. In the solid, I took one solid just before the session as a recovery. We are using, it's very, very close to 0.5-to-1 ratio between fructose, and it's a mixture of glucose, maltodextrin, and starch in the solid.
So you don't have one ratio across. Basically, it's depending on the product. You really tailor each product and each ratio, and even each ingredient, depending on the product, depending on the specificity of the product, shelf life, use, etc.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's a very scientific approach to try to get the maximum out of your product.
You can say that with the drink mix 160, for example, that is based on the 2-to-1 ratio or 0.5-to-1 ratio. Theoretically, you can consume up to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour with that product. Whereas with the 320 mix and the gels, you're able to kind of consume and absorb more than 100 grams per hour because of the fructose content.
Okay, thank you. One quick final question regarding ingredients, last one. And I think that's also one that is very important. Your products only have sodium. That's it. No other electrolytes, in other words, no other salts, no vitamins, minerals, etc. What was the decision behind only adding sodium?
It's pretty easy. MAURTEN is kind of an orthodox company. So we are very narrow, and we are kind of interpreting the scientific literature. And if we read into it, the science on different electrolytes, adding it during exercise is actually really weak. Really weak. There are actually no science that are supporting that you need it for preventing muscle cramps, preventing dehydration, preventing hyponatremia, or can enhance performance. So there are many different studies that are in support of this. So that's the main reason, I would say. But sodium is perhaps the only kind of electrolyte or salt that you actually need to replace to some degree, both for the glucose absorption in the intestine, but also for water retention and the plasma volume and blood volume.
I used to, I have a scientific background a little bit as well. And we used to say that wherever the sodium molecule goes, that's where water goes. So
Yes.
if you put salt, water is going to go with it. If you put salt back into the body, water is going to stay in the body.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
But MAURTEN is kind of the only brand worldwide who have gone on this direction. There is a big company in the US over the Atlantic Ocean called Gatorade, and they have been around for 50 or 60 years, and they have built the narrative of water intake. Hydration is super important, and electrolytes. So we have a lot of discussion with our North American team about electrolytes and this kind of concept that is really resting on really weak evidence.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
This is also important. It's no doubt that we need vitamins and minerals in our daily diets on a daily basis.
Yes.
They are essential for health and human function, but just replacing them during exercise doesn't hold.
Well, we always take time to mention that MAURTEN and all the brands that Nutri-Bay, we're involved with, these are complements to your daily healthy nutrition approach. So, you shouldn't be looking just for these products to be your main nutrition. It's a complement to your diet, basically.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. My next question really is, if you have a roadmap to some of the new products that may be coming out, without telling us any secrets that you don't want to reveal, but you can give us a few hints about what we could be expecting in the future from MAURTEN.
I can tell you a few things here. So MAURTEN, we try to interpret the science and the most kind of well-established products out there, or most established ingredients and so on. What kind of differs MAURTEN with other brands, I would say, who call themselves science-driven? We are more research-driven. So we are conducting the research, and we are kind of trying to find new things. And we describe ourselves as a biotech company who come up with innovations and come up with solutions. So that's kind of a different way to work. And it's not a secret anymore. We have been working with sodium bicarbonate for more than 2 years now, and we are close to finalizing a product to the market. And we have used kind of a similar concept as the hydrogel technology to deliver bicarbonate. And I used to explain the hydrogel technology as a delivery system of carbohydrates. So MAURTEN is not about providing super carbs or those things. The hydrogel is a delivery system, and we have used the same with sodium bicarb. So hopefully, if everything is successful, that product will be on the market, hopefully soon.
Great. So basically a new direction in terms of delivery system.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wow. Excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I can tell you, I mean, that's a product that have a very, very strong track record. It's a very, very well proven product that has been used by top athletes for the last 1.5 years.
Okay, great. Wow, definitely looking forward to seeing this new product.
That's not an easy product compared to carbohydrates, but that's another thing.
Very quickly, and this is both for you and for Ben. Maybe just quickly give us an idea what are the protocols that MAURTEN uses for different races, just a general overview. How would you, as an athlete, if you're going to do a semi-marathon, a marathon, triathlon, what approach should you have in terms of protocol?
I think Ben is much better than me to answer this, because when I'm on the starting line for a half marathon, I'm always in the red zone and hitting the wall.
That's right.
Well, Ben, I'm going to pass that to you then.
Yes.
To protocols, and after the protocols, we'll move over to the questions from the. We have quite a lot of them, so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Actually, for the protocol of a race, as Tobias mentioned in the beginning, it's very hard to have one protocol for all of the people listening now, because there's one likes gels, one likes drink mix, but I think since this sports nutrition is there, this MAURTEN, you can change your perspective from like before. The question was how much nutrition should I bring with me to finish the race, but now I like to change this into how much sports nutrition can you use to increase your performance on race day. So that's, I think, a big difference. I know this is not a protocol yet, but I will give you a quick example. What we like to advise the general people in the Berlin Marathon, and I know we've been talking to you guys about the Berlin Marathon. And in the Berlin Marathon, we often recommend to drink one drink mix 320 the night before you have the race. So you will finish this drink after dinner, just easy drinking, and not too close before you go to bed. So yeah, you spread this during the evening. You will sip on the bottle. Then the next morning, you will have a light breakfast, because maybe you're a bit excited and eating is not going so well, and you're maybe a little bit worried about the intestine and during the race if you eat too much in the morning. But you can complement this with another drink mix 320 before the start of the race in the bottle. During the race, actually in Berlin, there is the drink mix 160 along the course, but we will also recommend people to take one gel every 6 kilometers and alternate between caffeine and normal gels. That's the most general advice we give in this weekend. Yeah, so I think that's it. And you can take a drink mix 160 for hydration and carbohydrate intake after the race, because the first step in recovery starts in hydration and carbohydrate intake.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we go on, just a very quick note before we go on to the questions. Jean-Charles here is going to. Oh, directly the question. Okay. All right. We have several questions, and some of them are very similar, so I'm going to try to combine some of them in the interest of time also. So one question, yeah.
From iPhone.
From iPhone. We don't know what it is.
That's
no. If MAURTEN also investigating in recovery drinks where proteins come into play?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, so far we have been really into performance enhancers, and performance enhancers with a solid background kind of. But the kind of the next topic of course to investigate is recovery products. But this goes back a little bit to what I just said before, is that MAURTEN, at least at the moment, tries to be innovative and come up with solutions. And in that sense, a recovery product is not at the moment really a big, it's hard to innovate that with something that is a big difficulty at the minute. But yeah, of course, recovery products are of course on our agenda. But you can also say this is also important. I mean, fueling actually during a hard session or during a long run is a kind of a proactive way to recover actually. So we don't want to kind of block it or categorize it as pre, during, and post. I mean, if you zoom out, you can actually think about recovering actually during in a more proactive way.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting when you said the idea that you're recovering as you're going along because you're taking on the carbs. So it's an interesting idea. So a few people asked kind of a similar question. I'm going to group it together. One, can MAURTEN be taken with anything other than water? Can we mix it with anything other than water? And is there a difference in using, instead of 500, using 400 or 600 mils?
Yes. So if we take...
And just an additional, does the specific kind of water matter?
Yes. So, so the whole hydrogel technology in the drinks relies on the gelling formation or the hydrogel formation in acid. So we know that those gelling components, especially alginate, kind of is attracting different kind of minerals or different salts, and especially calcium. So above a certain threshold, kind of alginate molecule starts to attract calcium molecules or other kind of salts. And that means that the hydrogel formation in the stomach will be weaker.
Okay.
So we are pretty strict that for best function, for best creation of the hydrogel, users or consumers should mix the powder with a low mineral water or a low calcium water, especially.
Okay.
So that's.
Is there any brand water bottle that you recommend?
Yes, but it's different in different countries.
Spa. It's the spa.
Okay.
Spa water.
Yeah. It only contains 4 milligrams.
Normally,
France, Spa. Okay.
Yes, Spa would be.
I thought you were going to say some kind of a Swedish water that we don't have.
we have very, very low calcium in the tap water here, so the Swedish water are fine. But normally you can look on the labels. Let's say in Berlin, for example, the tap water has a very high calcium content. So, for example, the cheapest water in the stores have normally a very, very low mineral content. So that's one thing. When it comes to kind of mixing MAURTEN more concentrated or dilute the powder, it's not recommended by us. So let's say you have a 750 milliliter bottle. So let's say you have a 750 milliliter bottle, for example, and you add 1 sachet of MAURTEN, you will start to dilute the concentration of the gelling components.
Okay.
I hope that's clear. And with that, you will create a weaker hydrogel in the stomach. And also the opposite is true. Let's say you have a MAURTEN race bottle, for example. So this is 300. No, you don't have. But let's.
No, nobody has those except very few privileged people.
So let's say you have a bottle.
We have a couple.
You see. So let's say you have a bottle with 350 milliliters. 350 milliliters, and you add 1 sachet. That means the concentration of the gelling components will be higher, and you will create a stronger hydrogel in the stomach.
Okay.
So that's why we are pretty strict with the water and the volume of 500 milliliters.
I would like to point out that on your bottles, on your 500 ml bottle, not only is there a line how far you should go. I don't know if you can see. There's a line here, but also there's an indication. If you read, I'm sorry, an indication of what should be the water less than 40 milligrams per liter of calcium. So basically to answer the question, only water, only 500 milliliters and below 40 milligrams per liter.
Yes,
it's written on the bottle.
And mix it well, of course. All powder should be diluted. It should be a clear, transparent solution.
Okay. So if you stir a little bit on the bottom, keep mixing.
Yeah.
Sure. Gotcha. Are the products only made in Sweden, or do you have factories in other countries?
So the gels and the drink mixes are made in Denmark. And the reason for that was because of the manufacturer was approved by the US FDA. Okay. So we could already from the beginning start to export to US, which is a very difficult process otherwise. When it comes to the solids, they are produced in Central Europe or in the Netherlands.
Okay, thank you. This is kind of similar. Okay, kind of difficult question. Can we run a marathon only with gels, more gels, without any water?
That's not recommended because you will lose sweat and you will decrease your fluid balance, and that's another factor that can decrease the performance.
Okay. So here's a personal question from Stephen Blanc. My plan is to use MAURTEN for my next ultra race, but in the next weeks, the longest run I will do is 3 to 4 hours. If my body absorbs without any problem the products, can I make a guess that my body will still be okay after 20 to 30 hour race?
No. No, I think it's super hard to predict what's happening in the future, for example. I guess many of you watched the UTMB the last weekend, and I mean there are many difficulties during a 20-hour race, of course. So I think it's really hard. It's kind of doing a test for an 8-hour race when you are fresh. You should do it in a kind of fatigue state because that's much more relevant in a way.
Okay, thank you. No specific protocol for Diagonal des Fous because Steven is preparing the Diagonal, and so he saw your protocol on the UTMB, and he asked for the same protocol for the Diagonal des Fous. You know, he's preparing it. That's why he asked for the long distance and 40 hours.
Normally, normally, actually, I can tell you normally. I can say normally during an ultra run, for example, a 100-mile race or 100K race or 20-hour race, for example. Normally, I used to structure it like having something solid every 3 to 4 hours and try to mimic a normal eating pattern. You have something solid, and that also a good so you can break the distance down in more in short-term goals, for example. I mean, from a stomach perspective, it's always better during exercise to consume very easy digested carbohydrate sources. But I think to kind of to break the flavor fatigue and also break the boring run in a way, you can break it down every 3 to 4 hours with something solid.
I also heard that you know, the process of chewing is something that's very important, because also you're producing saliva and it's good for the stomach. So if you're doing a long ultra run, at one point you need a salad to help, you know, just for the fact that you're chewing, which is important.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where you can also have some nutrients and have some more complete or more nutritious foods.
Okay. One last question from Steven, really, it kind of completes his question. If the race starts in the evening, what is the protocol before the race? When should we drink the 320 in the morning before lunch?
Of course, I mean, it's super important to be well prepared. I think well rested is even more important. I mean, of course, it's very important to be loaded with carbohydrates, but I think during a 20-hour race, you will be depleted anyway, even how well you have been prepared. So I guess you need a structured plan during to reach the finish line.
We have a comment from Jean-Pierre also that was on the Grand Raid des Pyrénées last week, and it's a feedback of experience. He has difficulties to drink at the end of the race, and during MAURTEN, particularly because of the substance of the MAURTEN drinks also. But it's a personal return from him, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it can be super hard. I mean, the perception of something changes with time, of course, and with exhaustion.
Yes, sure, of course.
And from race to race too.
From race to race too.
Depending on your own body condition and preparation.
Yeah.
Changes from. Thibaut asked, this one?
Yes, we have the protocol on the website. Thibaut, we have all the protocol from MAURTEN in the guide, and Kirian already replied to Thibaut.
Great.
It's great.
Thanks, Kirian. Virginie asks, will you make something salty, quote unquote, to take as a flavor? Like because right now, of course, you're neutral, but there is still a sweetness. And these bars are edging on the saltiness.
Yes. So I can tell you the idea with when we started with the solid, it started actually with a kind of an ask from a cycling team, a professional cycling team, and they wanted a bar for their riders. And then we looked into the literature, and there are only a few studies that actually have kind of done measurements on a solid, how well it's actually absorbed and oxidized within the body. And we try to replicate that kind of solid. And yeah, that's the products you have in your hand. But the solid for me is a product for low to perhaps medium intensity exercise, long duration.
Okay.
So for me, it's not a product for high intensity performances.
Right, there you're going to be sticking to the gels mostly. You would drink a little bit.
Yes.
Where you do low intensity, long, you can integrate solid in there. As we said, for the chewing, for the absorption, for the flavor, breaking the flavor monotony, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Tobias, we're reaching the end over here. And Ben, I don't see Ben, but Ben, thank you as well.
You're welcome.
It was very kind of both of you. And Tobias, thank you for answering all these questions. It was very interesting and very informative. So, oops, something came over here. Oh, there you go. I don't know if you have any last minute comments or just gonna sign off. But either way, I wanted to say thank you very, very much.
Thank you too, and thank and good luck to everyone who listened to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. For all our participants, Jean-Charles is going to say something in French.
No, or in English, because they are all writing in English. So I guess French people and Belgian people are good speaker and listener in English. So, mais je vais le faire en français quand même. In French. So I request you a gift for this.
Yes.
So, on vous a préparé un code qui s'appelle Live MAURTEN 5. Live with the code Live MAURTEN 5. Kyrian va l'écrire. You can get €5 on your order, and we will add not this bag, okay? This bag for your shoes and so on, and we will add shoes. There's no shoes. And you will, vous aurez, je fais en français, on ajoute un sac dans toutes les commandes qui utiliseront le code Live MAURTEN 5, ok? Live MAURTEN 5, €5 de réduction, et ça, à partir de ce soir jusqu'au marathon de Berlin. Till the Berlin Marathon, so for 20 days, we are providing you a gift, and no matter the size of the order. Donc, quelle que soit la taille de votre commande, avec le code LIFEMORTEN5, vous aurez 5 € de réduction et aussi un sac Morten qui viendra s'ajouter à votre commande. J'ai oublié de dire que cette vidéo, elle va être traduite, elle recirculera, hein, on la réutilisera. N'hésitez pas à la faire tourner auprès de vos amis par après et faites-nous vos commentaires aussi sur la forme. C'est une première pour nous et on la fera évoluer. Thank you guys. Something else?
No.
Ah, 2 new packs. Sorry.
Oh, that's right.
Oui, on a créé 2 packs. Sorry, we have created we have created 2 trial packs, one without and one with caféine. Donc ça veut dire que ce sont des packs qui tournent autour de 16 € jusqu'à 21 €, 22 €. Donc ce sont des packs très très accessibles. On vous enverra les liens qui peuvent vous permettre de tester la marque si vous ne la connaissez pas. C'est vraiment un bon moyen de la tester. Et après ça, peut-être de faire un cadeau à un pote. C'est vite fait, un cadeau d'anniversaire, 15 €, 20 €, c'est dans les cordes. L'autre pack, on l'a fait évoluer. Vous saviez, on avait un full pack Morten qui était à 98,98 € et on y a intégré maintenant les barres et il reste au même prix. On a un peu joué sur les caféines pour vous mettre 3 barres de chaque. Donc, you have a full pack with all the products. And we have now 2 trail packs, one without and one with caffeine, at a very, very attractive. On those as well. Yes,
Okay, I would like to announce one more, I think, a little surprise. Yes, and I think it's a surprise for you also, GC and Jacques. Because I was a little bit inspired in the comments of this chat about the race bottle. So what if we say we do a lottery in the discount codes we use now? If there's, we do a lottery after Berlin Marathon.
Yeah, sure.
All the people who are using this code, there will be one bottle for someone.
En français, pardon. Donc, merci beaucoup. Donc, Ben Morten ajoute, en se disant finalement, on vous a donné un code et on tirera au sort des gagnants qui pourront avoir this race bottle or the other, peu importe. En tout cas, ils auront des bouteilles en cadeau et on tirera au sort parmi tous les gens qui ont utilisé le code LIFEMORTEN5 d'ici Berlin. Et après Berlin, on tire au sort. After Berlin, the game is over. Yes.
Wow, Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Surprise for us as well.
You're welcome.
So, that's nice. Awesome. Nice. Very good.
Merci, everyone. Thank you, Ben and Tobias.
And Arjen.
Arjen, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Arjen. As well.
Arjen is listening. He was telling me he's in the car. So
I was in the car.
yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
It was
Merci beaucoup.
we get to do this again sometime in the future. Tobias, good luck in the Berlin Marathon.
I need it. I really need it.
I will support him.
Ben, good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you.
Salut tout le monde.